Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
So, hello everyone, and with this we now enter into module 4, which is urban environmental social sciences frameworks. And I think in my previous lectures I had repeatedly mentioned about why it is important for us to understand urban problems, or more specifically urban environmental problems, from comprehensive and inclusive perspectives. And I think I also discussed that how urban environmental social sciences frameworks and approaches can be considered as primary or very significant paradigms through which urban environmental challenges as well as urban environmental potentials can be rigorously mapped and understood. So, with this we enter into this particular chunk, and the first lecture so far as this particular module is concerned would be on urban environmental history. And again, when I discuss urban environmental history, first I would like to shed light on the United States, the history of the emergence of this particular domain itself within the context of North America. And why North America? Because North America can be considered as a continent where urban environmental history, it emerged as a very formal discipline. And like if you see the works by different North American urban environmental historians, you will see that how the scholarship, it is having a very profound influence on the research of environmental historians pursuing urban history in several other parts of the world, most importantly Europe and South Asia. So, with this we would now discuss urban environmental history and the United States, North America as the context. And again I have divided this into two parts, part 1 and part 2. So, in part 1 I would basically be talking about the context that led to the emergence of urban environmental history in North America. Then I would discuss the themes, the various themes in North American urban environmental history by presenting a detailed state of the art review or a detailed analysis of the literature that exists in this particular domain. And once we finish this particular lecture, then we would move into the second part of this lecture on urban environmental history and the United States context, and there I would be shedding light on more thematic variations of the present times, and also be discussing a bit about like whether there is scope for kind of coming up with a more global comparative urban environmental trajectory by learning lessons from the so called quote unquote multiple elsewhere. So, that part I would take up in the next lecture, which would be lecture 22, but for now we will be concentrating on the context, the historical context, facilitating the emergence of urban environmental history in North America, the various themes in so far as this particular genre is concerned, and I would be presenting a detailed state of the art review or the scholarship that exists in this particular field. So, from the very beginning we can trace a kind of a city nature binary prevalent in both environmental history and also in urban history. So, maybe I would elaborate this a bit more. So, for example, people or the scholars who started writing environmental history, they were mainly concerned about so called quote unquote natural resources. So, like the history of parks, the history of forests, history of farming, etc. On the other hand, urban historians only concentrated on politics, crime, culture, infrastructure. So, city and nature or environmental history and urban history, it emerged as as kind of contradictory domains or contradictory subjects. So, city was always understood as an antithesis of nature. So, there you will be able to trace a kind of a city nature binary, so far as both urban history and environmental history are concerned. So, if wilderness was not perceived as an antithesis to urban life, but at least wilderness was explained and understood as the antidote to urban life. So, these kind of a binary and this antithetical formulation, it kind of swept the scenes of both environmental history and urban history in the United States for a long period of time. And this is there is a famous debate, the Worcester and Melosi debate. So, Donald Worcester, the very renowned environmental historian, the American environmental historian, who had published seminal works including the Dust Bowl and Ends of the Earth. So, Worcester, who was very much influenced by the crisis of agriculture during his times due to the prevalence of monocultural practices. So, he wrote an article called Transformations of the Earth toward an agroecological perspective in history. So, you can understand from the very title of the article itself, which actually was published in the Journal of American History in 1990, that what was Worcester trying to say. So, his whole emphasis was on the agroecological perspective. So, Worcester argued that so far as environmental history is concerned, along with the history of climate and weather that relies upon huge data sets on tides and winds, ocean currents, geological and hydrological forces, the living sources of the earth or the biota which have been more susceptible to human manipulation. And this is the argument which he provides, that why historians should be more bothered with the living sources of the earth or biota, because the living sources of the earth have been altered. The earth systems for that matter have been altered by human beings, by human activities. So, as these are more susceptible to human manipulation than non-biological factors, so they should occupy the primal place in environmental history. So, the key argument was that agriculture or farmlands, pasture lands, forests, etc. should be, according to Worcester, should get a kind of a significant place so far as the limits or the boundary of environmental history is concerned. So, that is what he said in this particular article in 1990, and 3 years after this, Martin Melosi, he published a seminal article called The Place of City in Environmental History, and this is I would request all of you to go through this article, and if you go through this article, you will be able to kind of understand Martin Melosi's point of view, where he kind of countered Donald Worcester argument about this whole lot of emphasis on agroecological perspective, and pointed out that urban environmental history should combine the study of natural history of the city with the study of the history of city building and their possible intersections or their interactions. So, according to Melosi, city or urban is very much a part and parcel of its larger environment, and the comment or the argument which he made, cities are derived from the natural world and they interact and blend with it. Just see this this quote which is on the right hand side, cities are derived from the natural world and they interact and blend with it. So, why should urban and environment be antithetical to each other? Because one must understand that from the very beginning they are actually integrated. These concepts, urban and environment, these spatial entities, they are not separate from each other. So, they are inseparable entities. They are not disparate categories. They cannot be disparate. Why? Because from the very beginning, cities, for example, they evolve through their interaction with the natural space. So, cities are derived from the natural world in that sense, and they continuously interact and blend with it. So, how can and why should not the city or the urban, why should not it have a place in the larger purview of the environmental history? So, according to Melosi, urban or city itself should comprise a very significant component or part of environmental history. So, yes, but I would also like to provide a brief prelude before I before I expose you directly to the works by urban environmental historians. So, before there was this rising or this emerging scholarship in urban environmental history in the United States, we find that there were some urban reformers, so they were mainly urban architects or urban planners who were talking about a kind of an organic relationship between the city and its larger ecological infrastructure or its hinterland, for that matter. So, I would briefly mention some of them, and I put this section as the prelude to the particular section or to the scholarship which emerged little later, mainly from the 1990s, when the city nature interconnection could be established, or people became more interested about the ecological footprints of the city, or about the different ways through which cities keep interacting with nature and vice versa, and how it kind of impacted the larger environmental dynamics. But before that scholarship emerged, we find several reformers, American urban reformers, mainly architects, landscape planners, who were propagating and who were also promoting the need to incorporate larger city nature interconnections understanding within the urban rubric. Right. So, for example, I would like to talk about Frederick Law Olmsted. I think some of you have heard about Frederick Law Olmsted, and he is a very renowned landscape architect, and this particular diagram or the picture that you see here, this is of the Black Bay fence in Boston. So, Olmsted's name and his design, of course, is associated with this Black Bay fence, and so Olmsted designed it in a way that it could actually function as a wetland to kind of receive and filter sewage and wastewater from the city of Boston. So, Olmsted also, for Olmsted, nature was actually not pristine nature. It was not wild, quote unquote, wild nature, but it was actually, nature was very much rooted in the everydayness, in everyday lives and livelihoods of people. And Olmsted, for example, his name is also associated with some very important parks, including Central Park, and also in the Chicago Streetcar Club, and as I also mentioned, this Black Bay fence. And Olmsted argued that nature or cityscapes should not be very placid, docile and timid in that sense, but cities should be planned and designed in such a way that the democratic essence can also be nurtured. So, they should also evolve as spatial sites of recreational commons, for that matter. So, the democratic idea, the democratic ideals and essence, there has to be scope, there has to be opportunity through which these ideals, these ideals could have been nurtured in cityscapes. So, then the city would kind of infiltrate a true sense of spirit, a true sense of freedom to its inhabitants. So, but very unfortunately, like when this Black Bay fence or the Black Bay fence was actually restored in the late 20th century, people forward Olmsted's original ideas, and only the aesthetic component of restoration remained, and it absolutely kind of replaced the functional component of the wetlands. And same goes with Central Park, because after a particular point of time there were a whole lot of restrictions even to enter the Central Park. So, alcoholism and several other things were restricted, and through those laws and regulations, the picnics were also restricted, for that matter, and the Irish and German immigrants who were who were strongly associated with the construction of the Central Park, they were absolutely not allowed to enter this park anymore. So, it became a site for the for the wealthier class, for the elite class, and it became a promenade for this elite class who could see this, could enter here, and who wanted themselves to be seen. So, yes, so this is the sad part of it, but yeah, I am discussing Frederick Law Olmsted here in order to discuss how these reformers actually understood this inherent relationship between city and its larger ecological dynamics. Then we have Jacob Riis and Frank Lloyd Wright. So, Jacob Riis again he talked about playgrounds, and he provided a whole lot of importance to playground in cities. So, for following Jacob Riis, we find cities like Chicago and Los Angeles. I think for the first time they came up with municipal departments which were entirely dedicated to the cause of playgrounds. So, we also have Frank Lloyd Wright, and Frank Lloyd Wright is very renowned for coming up with very innovative house buildings, housing plans. So, to him a particular house should actually speak to its surrounding landscape and vice versa. And Frank Lloyd Wright is also famous, if you see this mosaic here, the illustration in red, you would understand this is actually an illustration done by Wright so far as the broad acre city is concerned, but unfortunately the plan was never implemented. But still I think later the sprawling patchwork development of this sunbelt cities in that made way to Houston or Phoenix can be considered as indirect heirs to the planning ideals of Frank Lloyd Wright. And it also those patchworks could also kind of project and display the cultural sentiments embodied in the ideas of Frank Lloyd Wright. So, yes, so before we move into the major component of urban environmental scholarship or urban environmental historical scholarship in the United States, I would like to discuss two major figures without discussing whom the prelude would otherwise remain incomplete. So, these two figures are Louis Mumford and Jane Jacobs. So, Louis Mumford, again he is the person who who wrote this particular book called The City in History, its origins, its transformation and its prospects, and he connected the growth of city to the rise of civilizations. And so, Mumford uttered that cities were places where natural and built environments, nature, culture, technology coexisted in a complex balance. So, he could actually understand this particular coexistence. So, if you go through his books, you will also get a detailed hint of the organic relationship, or rather I would say that the kind of urban metabolism that exists. Louis Mumford was quite conscious about the prevalence of this metabolism, and he pointed out that any urban plan or design for that matter should consider this urban metabolism as a key component before that design particularly is actually made and gets consolidated before its implementation. So, yes, Mumford I think is also Mumford should be read extensively and widely, because I think Mumford talked about this city, nature and technology. He addressed the city, nature and technology intersections, and he can be regarded as a very significant urban scholar come reformer who gave whole lot of emphasis on cities and the urban form, and why and how urban form was actually not devoid of its larger social, economic, political and environmental dynamics. And the last figure whom I would like to mention here in this prelude section is Jane Jacobs. And Jane Jacobs, like like Mumford, she also provided whole lot of agency to human existence in this urban form and in this distinct urbanism, a distinct form of American urbanism. And Jane Jacobs published number of works, very famous works, and he was never trained in urban planning or urban design, but I think there is no course in urban design or urban architecture, I mean in the whole world, that does not teach Jane Jacobs. So, Jacobs she wrote this particular book called The Death and Life of Great American Cities. And in this particular book, if you go through these pages, you can also understand that why she was she was not at all happy with urban planners and urban designers like Robert Moses of her times, because during that time there was a revolution which was going on in terms of city redevelopment initiatives, and Jane Jacobs was not at all happy so far as those redevelopment programs were concerned, because they were actually kind of replacing the vibrant community life in American cities, and these redevelopment initiatives were also trying to kind of demolish the so called quote unquote blighted neighborhoods, which Jane Jacobs never supported. So to her, to Jane Jacobs, cities were of course integrated systems, and they promoted higher density in cities. She talked about short blocks, local economies and mixed uses, and of course she through her works and through her activism, she invigorated neighborhood activism. And this book, Lawrence Culver, whom we will mention when we discuss urban environmental history scholarship in the United States. So Culver is an important name. She also wrote a book on South California. We will discuss that. But Culver talks about Culver, so far as Culver's remark about the death and life of great American cities is concerned, to her this book is a manifesto in the favor of the messy but vital living communities. And here Jane Jacobs come out as a luminary figure, because she kind of criticized people like Moses and all, because they did not pay much, their plans did not pay much recognition and reverence to the vital living communities, which were which were so very important so far as urban planning laid out by Jane Jacobs was concerned. So yes, with this now I think we entered into the more hardcore component of this particular topic. So if you see 60s and 70s, you still find that urban history and environmental history, as I mentioned, they developed as separate streams. They did not converge with each other. So the urban history in America during 60s and 90s, urban historians were trying to address their own sets of problems. So for example, if you see the context, the historical context, the political context of United States during that time, then you will see that there was civic activism, civil society movements and gender movements for that matter, a whole lot of issues in terms of immigration, and one very interesting thing that was taking place during that time is that the historians were no more interested to kind of portray and project top down a chronological narrative of political history, being concerned about the rise and fall of empires and political leaders, etc. But they were more interested in quantitative history, because there was also the development of cliometrics for that matter. So data induced history, and historians were very interested. They were quite interested about social history themes, including race, gender, ethnicity, etc. And they were also like writing a lot on crime, criminality and the implications of urban sprawl. right? Because one needs to remember that, you know, if you see post Second World War America, post World War II America, it was a period of reconstruction, but more it was also a period of like urban sprawl and mass, mass suburbia. So the urban historians, they were writing on those themes. On the other hand, environmental historians were also they were becoming more and more interested, or they were moving away from, you know, from nature, where nature was only understood as pristine and you know, wild. So they were more interested in ecology, which was rooted in everyday lives. So they were interested, or they were working with more immediate and urgent environmental problems or challenges like pollutions, toxins, and again implications of urban sprawl, you know, on ecology. So they were moving away from nature in national parks to nature in one's backyard, if I put it like that. But what was happening again was that though there were these common vantage points of crisis, so you know, mainly urban historians focusing on riots, declining downtowns, suburbanization, etc., and the environmental historians talking about pollution, toxins, etc. But still these two fields did not converge with each other. So for example, the book by Roderick Nash, Wilderness in the American City, so there he Wilderness and American Civilization, sorry. So there he mentions about the urban or city only once, right? And you know, so far as like very renowned historians like Richard White, Donald Webster were concerned, they were not at all focusing on urban issues. So urban was still taking a back seat, you know, in their environmental analysis. But the environmental turn in urban history and vice versa actually occurred during the 1990s, when urban environmental history developed as a major subfield of both urban and environmental history. And Dieter Schrott, in the article called Urban Environmental History, published in the Boreal Environmental Research in 2004, sketches stresses three major influences that led to the emergence of urban environmental history in North America during the 1990s. So the first influence, she says that the research was already going on urban technical infrastructures. So people like Martin Melosi and Joel Tard, they were very fascinated with what they call invisible city. So you know, they were very interested about water in, water out system, and about garbage disposal, sewerage technologies, etc. So they were already focusing on, you know, the technical infrastructures. And of course one knows, you know, that garbage, sewage, these are the common contact points through which one can understand city nature interactions. So this can be this growing literature on urban technical infrastructures in the United States can be kind of considered as a significant factor, that facilitated urban environmental history in the American scene. Followed by a seminal publication in 1991 by William Cronon, and the book is called Nature's Metropolis, and it is on Chicago. So we will discuss how, you know, this book, it till date, it has a profound and a long lasting influence on both urban and environmental historians. And finally, you know, this 1990s is also important because all of us know about the publication of the, you know, sustainable, or the formulation of the concept of sustainable development by the United Nations, the Rio de Janeiro conference, and the coming out of the Brundtland report. So when this sustainable development concept, it was floated, and a whole lot of research was going on by scholars and experts across various levels, and from different disciplinary backgrounds. The urban historians and environmental historians also asked, you know, questions like how and where cities sustainable in the past. So if there had been qualitative ruptures in the relationship between city and nature, why these ruptures had actually taken place. So are there mechanisms through which these ruptures can actually be tackled? So in order to answer this question, I mean, it was needed to look back in order to look forward. So, these are the three influences that had dominated or that actually could facilitate the emergence of urban environmental history. So, with this very quickly I would talk about this the books or the works which are like very influential works. Not only they influenced historians within the American subcontinent, but these works also crafted like global influence. These works could have these works forged a lot of interest about city nature interrelationship, so far as environmental historians of other parts of the world are concerned. So, these are the three major books by Martin Melosi: Garbage in the Cities, The Sanitary City, and Effluent America. And as I mentioned that Martin Melosi, like Joel Tarr, also focused on urban technical infrastructures, and by focusing on the history of technical infrastructure could actually unfurl and unpack city nature relationship across long temporal scales. This is again a very significant publication from Joel Tarr, and this book is called The Search for the Ultimate Sink. And here Joel Tarr says that this safe ultimate sink, it is an illusion, it is an illusory idea, because like for example, if you think that the sewage treatment plants or the machines that you use for kind of filtering pollution or filtering waste, through that you are actually you are being able to follow safety measures, but that's an illusion. Why? Because the treatment plants which actually filters waste, they also generate waste. So, there cannot be anything like the safe ultimate sink, because whatever we generate in the atmosphere or in the environment, it finally comes back to us. So, in this book he talks about this particular phenomena, unfortunately. So, I have cited this from the book itself, that he talks about the dumping of urban sludge from sewage treatment to the sea and the boomerang effect of it. So, how it comes back to us in through decimated, deformed and degenerate fish resources. So, how to dispose of those highly toxic substances which have been filtered out is the mega question. Then I talked about this particular book by William Cronon, Nature's Metropolis, and here in this book Cronon, he absolutely kind of not only blurred, but he dismantled the city nature or the city country division by focusing on the web of functional relationships between the urban and its wider environment. So, he talks about here by focusing on commodity flows, commerce, and for example, collection of meat and collection and processing of meat, animal products, timber, etc. He talks about how Chicago was related to and exploited its hinterland, the Great West. So, Chicago, it was derived from the natural world, but at the same time it also impacted the natural world. So, how Chicago and its hinterland could shape and get shaped through this continuous interaction between the urban and the environment. So, in this book Cronon talks about how the Nature's Metropolis, Chicago, profited directly from the industrialization of agriculture and mechanization of meat processing. So, this is again a very significant book, because this theoretical understanding on commodity flows that which could enable the rise and functioning of metropolitan cities like Chicago. This framework was borrowed by several other historians in the working in the United States and also beyond. Other books like this book by Ari Kellman on River and City, there are several chapters that discuss whole range of topics, including yellow fever, hurricanes, cyclones, yellow fever, hurricanes, floods, etc. And this is of course on New Orleans. So, and New Orleans is a disaster prone city. So, in our next lecture we would discuss a bit more on Ari Kellman, and I will tell you that why I would again mention Ari Kellman, and with a different context that time. And then we have like Cole Thrush, who inserted the Native Americans while he discussed, you know, this, the making of Seattle. And then we have David Stradling, who talked about, you know, this New York City and its Catskills as, you know, as also he talked about the hinterland as a space of recreation, right? So, the recreational hinterland of the New York City. Then this award winning book by Matthew Klingle on Seattle again, and he talks about how, you know, Seattle actually drew its identity from its spectacular surroundings, but again Seattle could also impact its surrounding with, you know, long term ecological footprint implications. Then the book by Michael Rawson, and also this book, particular book by Lawrence Culver. And Lawrence Culver, you know, was very much influenced by William Cronon, and talks about, you know, that the whole book, The Frontier of Leisure, it is on how, you know, South California came up as a tourist wonderland, and how it was reclaimed from the otherwise supposed wasteland. And in this book also talks about the growth of resorts, like for example Palm Spring, and how, you know, these resorts could actually promote cities like Los Angeles, and also propagate, you know, this distinct form of American urbanism. So, yes, these are the references on urban environmental history. I would definitely encourage you to go through this third references, which is by Culver. So, this is no, this is the book by Culver, but I would like you mainly to go through, you know, this is another book chapter by Culver, and maybe I will insert the reference here. Culver wrote a book chapter which provides a historiographical account on nature culture confluence in North America. So, this is a book by Andrew Eisenberg on environmental history, and chapter 19 by Culver is on, you know, urban environmental history. So, I would definitely share the reading material with you, and also if possible please go through the seminal writing by Melosi, The Place of City in History. So, other works, if you can go through at least the introduction or the abstract of the journal articles, that would be sufficient, or that is fine with me, but at least I would encourage you to go through Culver's book chapter, and also the work by Martin Melosi, that is The Place of City in Environmental History. So, yes, I would like to conclude by saying that in this lecture we discussed the context 70s to 90s, you know, that how urban and environmental history were absolutely contradictory. The urban historians did not did not discuss environment and vice versa, but how, you know, gradually from divergence convergence could be crafted. So, how the historians then could identify you know, common vantage points, and how they started addressing city nature intersections. We discussed the prelude before we where we discuss, you know, the works and ideas and perspectives of key urban reformers like Olmsted, Jane Jacobs, Louis Mumford and others. And then we talked about the three major influences which which you know, actually made the convergence, urban environmental convergence possible. And then we discussed the several themes and the key ideas in urban environmental history by discussing the key works or the key, you know, books and articles produced by American urban environmental historians since the 1990s. So, thank you, and the next part of urban environmental history, again the United States, but with more thematic variations will be taken up. Thank you.